Artura the Unseen. She lifted the sword, he got the throne. Part 1. The Accidental Heroine. Chapter 1. The Muck of Mudfen. Who grows wise in filth? It began, as all great legends do, with a blocked privy. Mudfen, a village so small it had to borrow its ducks from the next town over, was not known for producing heroes. It was known for producing turnips. Some of them angry. And on this particular morning, it produced a woman ankle-deep in other people's breakfast. Artura of Mudfen was not the sort of girl ballads were written about. She had a chin like a stubborn boot, shoulders like an ox that had regrets, and hair that had once tried to flee her head entirely. She was also clever, which in Mudfen was treated with the same suspicion as sorcery, vegetarianism, and using a spoon correctly. Artura was a barrel hauler by trade, a pig wrangler by necessity, and a liar only when absolutely required. Which, on this particular fog-drenched morning, was about every 3 minutes. The village privy had collapsed during the night. Due to a mysterious combination of structural rot, a badly aimed celebratory goat, and a boy named Finn who had thought it was funny to jump up and down shouting, "Behold, I summon the thunder!" So Artura, in search of some dignified solitude, made for the only other vaguely private spot, the old grove near the Standing Stone, the one with all the mysterious glowing birds no one liked to talk about. And that was her first mistake. Her second mistake was thinking she could squat near a sword in a rock without consequences. The sword, of course, was Excalibur, the sword of destiny, the blade of kings, the steel that chooses, also known in Mudfen as that weird thing that stuck old Barry once. It had sat there in that mossy stone for decades, waiting patiently for someone worthy to pull it free. Many had tried. All had failed. Some dramatically, some embarrassingly, one fatally. Sir Dobbins of Wigglebottom had sneezed mid-heave and tragically inhaled a bee. But this morning, this one very stupid, very foggy morning, Artura, not seeing the thing for the mist and being rather pressed for time, leaned back slightly and pulled. There was a sound like a smug twang, a faint gasp from the heavens, and then the sword came loose as easily as a spoon from pudding. She blinked. The sword blinked back. Figuratively, it wasn't enchanted, it was just judgmental. Artura stared at the shining blade now resting in her very mortal, very muddy hand. "Oh, bollocks," she muttered. Which, as it turns out, was the first royal decree of the New Age. Now, dear reader, you might be wondering, did she panic? Did she drop the sword, run for the hills, and vow never to touch shiny objects again? No. She did what any sensible peasant with strong arms and stronger opinions would do. She shoved the sword into a barrel of goose feed and hoped the prophecy wouldn't notice. And that might have worked. It might have been the shortest and least interesting legend ever told. Had it not been for him. Enter Arthur. Arthur Pendragon was the sort of man who could win a joust simply by smiling apologetically. He had hair like sunlight and the internal compass of a very confused ferret. He was the son of a minor duke, distant cousin to 2 dead kings, and vaguely related, through marriage and poultry, to the old High Queen of something or other. Most importantly, he had been searching for the sword. Not, it must be said, with any real skill or sense of urgency. But he had prayed, squinted meaningfully at maps, and once shouted, "Reveal thyself!" at a puddle. So he thought that counted. When he stumbled into the grove that morning, draped in mist, destiny, and a breakfast pastry he hadn't quite finished, he beheld a vision. A muddy, glowing figure holding Excalibur aloft, steam rising from her boots, wind catching her hair in a vaguely epic fashion. The wind, it turned out later, was just a farting pig nearby, but still, it looked epic. Arthur gasped. Loudly, Artura turned. Sword still in hand. They locked eyes. Time froze. And Arthur, eyes wide with dumbstruck awe, whispered, "Are you my destiny?" Artura, whose brain had already started sprinting toward the border, replied with the first thing that came to mind. "No, I'm your squire, and you drop this." She held out the sword. He took it. Her fate was sealed. Thus began the greatest lie in Albion's history, that Arthur Pendragon had drawn Excalibur and was therefore king. He hadn't. She had. But that, dear reader, is a tale for Chapter 2, which contains one goose, 2 broken teeth, and the unfortunate baptism of a chamber pot. You're welcome! Chapter 2, The Sword and the Something. What happens when royalty gets upstaged by a peasant's bladder? It is a truth universally acknowledged that a kingdom in want of a hero must wait for someone dramatic enough to draw a sword from a stone, and not, say, someone looking for a discreet place to relieve themselves. Unfortunately for Albion, what they got was Artura. She had ventured into the fog-cloaked grove with 2 urgent goals: find somewhere quiet to pee, not freeze her backside off while doing it. Neither goal, in her defense, included accidentally triggering destiny. The grove was ancient, sacred, and entirely unbothered by the notion of plumbing. At its center stood the Stone of Kings, a mossy lump of legend, home to Excalibur, the sword of the one true ruler, forged in dragon fire, bathed in moonlight, and currently being used as an accidental handrail. Artura, trousers halfway down and balancing precariously on a slippery root, reached out blindly. Her hand closed around something cold, metallic, and rather more ornate than she expected. There was a shik noise, a faint heavenly ding, possibly a sparkle. And then the sword came loose, like butter, like destiny, like the universe clearing its throat and saying, "Right, pay attention." Artura froze. Trousers down, sword in hand. She did what any reasonable, mud-crusted peasant would do in that situation. She screamed, loudly. And the sword, the mythical sword of Albion, echoed the scream by glowing faintly, as if to say, "Yes, you. We meant you. We're as surprised as you are." Enter Arthur. It should be noted that Arthur Pendragon had not come looking for Artura. He had come looking for Excalibur. Or more accurately, a photo opportunity with Excalibur followed by an enthusiastic crowd and maybe a bard or 2. The kingdom was in political disarray, and Arthur's uncle, Duke Lansing of Clefchin, had suggested that pulling the sword might give him something to do besides polishing his hair and starting fires with mirrors. So there he was, galloping dramatically through the mist, his horse snorting, his cape flapping, and his brain already drafting the victory speech. He arrived at the grove just in time to see a rather muscular figure silhouetted in the fog, sword raised, pants down. He blinked. Once. Twice. "Is that?" he began. Artura turned, very slowly, sword in one hand, trousers only mostly up. Arthur's eyes widened. The sword was glowing. The figure was radiant, mostly from sweat. The moment was holy. Also awkward. "Are you an angel?" he whispered. Artura, aware that she looked more like a goat herder halfway through a bad decision, replied, "Sure." Arthur fell to his knees. "You've come to deliver Excalibur to me, as foretold." Artura squinted. "Foretold by whom?" "By Merlin," said Arthur. He had a vision. There would be a radiant being in the fog with glorious thighs and a divine blade. Artura glanced down at her thighs. They were, admittedly, doing quite a lot of the visual heavy lifting. "Well," she said, hoisting the sword. "Here it is." Arthur took the hilt reverently, like a man holding the keys to a very fancy outhouse. "I feel chosen. You're holding it backwards." "Oh." He flipped it. "Yes, that feels more kingly." And just like that, the lie was born. Arthur held the sword. Artura yanked up her trousers. And the wind chose that exact moment to clear the fog dramatically, revealing the full scene as if cued by a director with a flair for the overdone. A flock of birds scattered. A choir of ducks honked nearby. Arthur raised the sword, triumphant. Artura took a nervous step back, hoping no one asked questions like, "Wait, who actually pulled it?" Or, "Why is there moss in her waistband?" "Come," said Arthur, offering her his arm. "You must join me at court as my sworn knight." Artura, who had never sworn allegiance to anyone who didn't pay her in cider, blinked. "Knight? Yes. You have the spirit of a warrior, and thighs of prophecy. Right. You shall ride beside me, in my armor if you like. I brought a spare. Of course you did. And that, dear reader, is how Arthur, the almost king, rode out of the grove holding a sword he didn't pull, while Artura, the bladder-blessed, donned armor she didn't own, to protect a kingdom that didn't yet realize it owed her everything. Destiny, it turns out, has a very strange sense of humor, especially about toilets. Chapter 3. Arthur and the Awkward Gasp. Why does he think he saw an angel in armor? If you've never seen a man fall in love with his own delusion, you should have been in that grove. Arthur Pendragon had been riding for hours, through mud, mist, and a deeply confusing detour involving a bridge, 3 goats, and one very sarcastic toll collector. By the time he arrived at the sacred grove, he was cold, hungry, and spiritually open to any miracle that vaguely resembled a woman with a sword. So when he saw her, Artura, muddy, glistening with fog sweat, clutching Excalibur like it had personally insulted her mother, his first thought was, an angel. His second thought was, with thighs. His third was, say something impressive. What came out of his mouth instead was, are you glowing? Or is that just holiness leaking? Artura blinked. Now, to be fair to Arthur, he'd grown up on a strict diet of prophecies, polished mirrors, and bedtime stories in which the true king would be visited by a divine being with golden hair, a mighty blade, and talent for dramatic entrances. Artura, at that moment, met exactly one of those criteria. Possibly 1.5 if you counted her hair, which had an accidental halo effect due to a large clump of sheep wool caught in it. Arthur, of course, took this as confirmation. You're her, he whispered. Artura sighed. I'm her? The Lady of the Blade. The warrior saint. The chosen guardian of the glorious king-to-be. He looked like a man halfway through writing his own statue inscription. She looked like a woman who needed a stiff drink and a fresh pair of socks. Right, she said. That's me. Arthur clutched his chest as if overcome by love, destiny, indigestion, or possibly all 3. You have come to guide me, he breathed. To protect me, to hand me the sword that will make me king. Artura looked down at Excalibur, still faintly humming in her hand like a smug tuning fork. She briefly considered correcting him. Then she considered her rent. Yes, she said flatly. I am the angel of armor, and lo, I bring thee thy destiny. Arthur gasped. Loudly. Birds fled the trees. Somewhere a frog fainted. He reached out. Artura handed him the sword with the same expression one might give while offering a child a pair of scissors, confident on the outside, screaming internally. Arthur raised Excalibur with both hands, triumphantly, and nearly hit himself in the nose with the pommel. It fits, he cried. It's mine. It wasn't. But sure. They rode toward Camelot together, Arthur glowing like a blessed lantern, and Artura increasingly regretting every decision made since the age of 3. Arthur couldn't stop talking. I always knew I was meant for greatness. I used to tell the fishmonger's cat, Arthur, you're a ruler of men, not mackerel. And look! The sword knew. Artura nodded, wearing a helmet far too shiny and trousers far too tight. Behind her, strapped to Arthur's saddle, was her old tunic and a bundle of mystery moss, now technically a holy relic. At the gates of Camelot, the guards snapped to attention. Arthur raised Excalibur. One guard gasped. Another fainted. The third saluted a shrub by mistake. The sword! One cried. The prophecy! Artura coughed and tried to look ethereal. Arthur beamed and declared, And this is my knight, my secret protector, sent by the heavens. The court gawked as she dismounted with all the grace of a woman who had, until that morning, only ridden carts pulled by drunken donkeys. In plate armor that squeaked like a panicked duck, she followed Arthur into the great hall, where nobles, scribes, and one very judgmental goose turned to stare. A silence fell. Then someone, probably Sir Scuttle, though no one could prove it, whispered, Is the angel limping? That night, the kingdom celebrated. Bards sang. Flags waved. The taverns ran out of beer by mid-afternoon. And in the corner of the throne room, hidden in borrowed armor and bad decisions, stood Artura, Knight of the Lie, hero of the wrong person, and first of her name. Technically not her name. The legend had begun. With an awkward gasp. And a very confused king.